2 weeks ago, I put out a video with a lot of recommendations and advice for beginners who are interested in buying a gun. One of which was, you'll likely need a Glock 19, and a 380 Easy is a good backup if you can't physically manipulate a Glock. And this added along to an age-old dumpster fire argument. 380, is it worth anything in any context? Why do so many people teach that it's worthless? Why do so many people defend it fiercely? Why do you get so many people angrily screaming at you whether it's useless or perfection? How can people who teach firearms have such wildly different opinions on the same round? 380 is one of those rounds that has so many myths associated with it that I felt it appropriate to write an entire episode dedicated to dispelling them. Because I've heard frankly, wild range of claims around 380. Some of them are based in half-truths or in a useful and misleading set of data that's commonly available and we should talk about. And for every person that swears one way, there's someone to argue with them, and somehow both of them manage to be wrong half the time. So let's nail down the truth, because knowing what your gun can, can't, and won't do is a huge part of being capable with it. So, first of all, let's talk about what 380 even is. There are a lot of rounds with 9mm bullets, because 9mm is more a category than really a designation. In modern times, in most cases, 9x19 is the 9mm that you think of when you hear the word 9mm, and it is often used as a shorthand, somewhat incorrectly. That means it's a 9mm bullet in terms of width with a 19mm case length. 380 ACP, also known as 9x17, is referred to as 9 short in large parts of the world because it has a 9mm bullet width and a 17mm case length, giving it less powder behind the same bullet width. This tends to lead to lower bullet speeds and less ballistic energy in a very similarly shaped package. 380 ACP was first revealed in a gun literally named the Pocket Hammerless. It has never shaken the reputation in the United States as being best for pocket handguns designed to be easy to conceal in deep cover rather than being designed to be a fantastic shooting package. In fact, if you tell a surprising number of people 380 ACP, they'll ask you, isn't that a snappy cartridge? Because the only guns they've shot with it are tiny pocket pistols. This comes from a quirk in physics. See, physics is a ledger that demands transactions. When you are looking at small guns, it's important to note that the more weight of the gun, the less force it will be applied to the end user, and the smaller the area the force is distributed over, the higher it feels. Pocket pistols often weigh next to nothing and have short magazines, making a firm grip hard. Remember this for later. 380 ACP was used by a bunch of the wrong side of World War II. The Germans called it 9 Kurs and the Italian 9 Quarto, although notably it was also used for the General Officer's Pistol among US troops, who were issued a pocket hammerless M1908. Afterwards, it ended up being used by a bunch of police agencies across Europe, all the way up to the late 1970s, when many of those units started switching to 9x19 Parabellum. It's still in use in a variety of specific units, especially those in smaller cities. The FBI put a significant investment into testing how bullets work after several incidents where several agents or local police or both were wounded or lost due to a mismatch in weapons, and the first collected study they came up with was okay for the time, but still somewhat flawed. It concluded that the FBI should carry 10mm, a decision they'd later come to regret, but it also went into testing multiple calibers to approve or disapprove of them for individual agents to carry. In the 80s, 380 was listed as the minimum acceptable caliber for use as a main sidearm by agents. They continued testing this in the 90s, and in the 2000s, 380 was shifted in the FBI testing standards from minimum acceptable to acceptable as a backup, but 9mm is the new minimum acceptable for your daily firearm. The FBI used 10mm until they realized their agents hated trading in huge amounts of the round, and they slowly went from 10mm to 40 until finally switching to 9mm. Their reasoning is, as you can guess from a group that fights professionally based in sound logic. The heaviest round you can trade with regularly without hating life after is the round you should take. More training is better than a slightly bigger bullet. And for the vast majority of people, pistols beyond 9mm are more of a handful for large volumes of fire, pun not intended. When you train a lot with your pistol, which you should, you can discover that it's a physical activity and it gets tiring near the end. FBI agents would leave training not wanting to shoot ever again because they just shot 5,000 rounds of high recoil 10mm ammunition over a short period of time as their initial training session. This also is a place where someone's muscle mass and physical size can negate the recoil more, but for the vast majority of human beings, including FBI agents, remember, 9mm was considered the most powerful round people would consistently want to train with. Okay, takeaway number 1. You cannot miss your way to a win in a gunfight. Bodies are varied and weird. Genuinely test for yourself, but genuinely test for yourself what you're fastest with. Now, there is a lot of ballistics data charts that exist, some of them showing almost contradictory data around 380 and adding yet another log to the dumpster fire that is the 380 versus 9mm argument. Part of the problem is how people test 380 in gelatin. There's a lot of data available from various sources. The problem isn't even that I think there's people purposefully manipulating the data. The problem is you have a lot of people who think they know the best use case to be the only one worth testing, and it throws the data they collect in favor of 9mm. I'm going to highlight 2 great sources of data and sort of combine them here. First of all, Lucky Gunner did a great job giving a well-presented set of data showing a number of 380 options that were shot into gel, and they demonstrated penetration as well as expansion in this great, easy to look at chart. And in their data, the only round that gets both the FBI minimum for penetration and consistently expands is Hornady Critical Defense. However, there's a flaw in their collection method. They specifically tested pocket pistols when they shot 380. This is where I want to cross the data with Ballistics by the Inch, a great source of information on firearms generally. That FBI minimum penetration could take its own episode to explain, but thinking simply, modern handgun rounds do damage from penetrating deeply enough to get to something vital, and expanding to damage that vital thing. Don't expand, you more likely than not won't hit something vital, and if you don't penetrate, even if you get good expansion, it won't get to the vital bits inside. The FBI made a gel that's just a known standard, and based on their other field testing and information from trauma surgeons specializing in bullet wounds, the standard they set was, you're looking for at least 12 inches of penetration into this gel and for good expansion from the bullet that got there. Real quick, trigger gets pulled, hammer comes down, firing pin is hit, bullet goes off. It slowly but surely builds up speed as it goes down the barrel. Longer barrel, higher bullet speed. To a point, eventually you'll start slowing down the bullet, and there's some specific lengths where that isn't true, but that is the general pattern as shown on Ballistics by the Inch. The problem with 380 testing is so much of it is tested on common 380 guns, and it throws off the data. That Lucky Gunner testing information all happened on a pocket pistol, a relatively short-barreled 380 ACP. Add back some bullet speed from a longer barrel, and some of those options that expand but just don't penetrate quite enough suddenly have deep enough penetration to pass the FBI standards. Expansion will become more consistent. All the results generally look better. Takeaway number 2. Using the right round out of a long barrel, you can do similar expansion and damage at very short ranges as many common 9mm hollow points with reduced recoil if you use 380 ACP. There are absolutely moments where this is advantageous. The recoil also means one-handed drills become significantly easier, which in a tussle matters. However, there's a couple giant asterisks to the 380 out of a long barrel trick. 9mm carries a heavier bullet. 380 is frequently between a 55 to 100 grain projectile, while 9x19 commonly ranges from 115 to 150 grains. A little bit heavier is also common, and it's still a bit faster. And while 380 might get up to faster speeds with longer barrels, it's still outclassed by 9mm, and it has less momentum to keep that speed through the air. Now, 9mm hollow points also have an expansion problem at extreme distances, but depending on the round and various other circumstances, hollow points launched out of full-size platforms tend to stop expanding consistently around 50 to 75 yards. There's some variables here because there's literal piles of ammunition makers and types of hollow points and everything from 1.5 to 17-inch 9mm barrels. But if you're using something like Gold Dot or Critical Defense or something, quote, known good out of a Glock 19 or similar, the data shows you'll expand consistently out to 60 to 70 yards, at which point you are now potentially throwing a 9mm rock rather than a hollow point. For 380, that distance is roughly 25 yards, which is... wait, that's not that far. Takeaway number 3, even using the most generous data, assuming the longest common barrels and checking basically every defensive ammo available, most types of 380 hollow point begin to have expansion and penetration problems at shorter distances than 9mm due to their reduced speeds. It is worth remembering when carrying 380, you are essentially limited in your engagement distance. To some, this is unacceptable. To others, they look at their personal environment and confidently carry 380 knowing it works when they work it. 380 comes up in conversations about overpenetration, and this is where I get to tell you about some future IRL videos. Hi there, I feel like it's been a while. I've been doing a lot of the animated side of this channel, which I'm really happy with the content, don't get me wrong, but there is some stuff that I want to be showing you that requires actually showing you what it looks like when you are using certain physical techniques, or more commonly, what happens when bullets actually go through things. So for some of that stuff, we'll be doing some live recording in the near future, and I'll be including a lot more of that in the channel. And especially when it comes to overpenetration, a lot of that is best taught with actual real examples. But I would also say, for right now, the easy way to think about it is, remember, if a bullet doesn't expand, it doesn't mushroom and kind of become the parachute that would slow down a round. So if 380 isn't going fast enough to expand, you could ironically have an overpenetration issue, not because the round wouldn't have been effective if it had worked, but because at a longer range it didn't expand, and by not expanding, it flew through whatever medium it impacted in with far less resistance. But a lot of this is something that we're going to get into in the live video part of this, because a lot of different surfaces, it's hard to explain without just showing. And showing what a bullet does when it impacts various surfaces is often going to be the best way of communicating that information. And I can't wait to show y'all. Stay tuned, awesome stuff coming. I don't want you leaving this thinking either way about 380. It's an effective round in some situations. It has strict limitations. It's more expensive to practice with. The guns that exist for it, if you want to consider it as your main pistol, these each deserve their own video, but briefly, the ADX is a lot of money for something that makes you pick between a rear sight and a red dot. The Ruger Security only gives you a full grip with one of its optional magazines. The T-Sash Fati and the MC14T from Gerson. Okay, these are bite the back of your hand sexy, but the Fati is hard to recommend given its lack of modernization options, and even the MC14T, despite its pick rail, can't get an optic mounted. You're limited to the optional night sights, which, at least that's something. It's still a bit hard to recommend in 2024. That is also the problem with the EZ, although their night sights and perfect balance do make both the EZ and MC14T decent backup options. The Glock 25 is the only one that could be made into a full modern fighting pistol with a red dot, backup irons, and a light, but such a setup would drive you north of $1,000. Combine that with the added costs of 380 ammunition, and it's hard to recommend over just practicing more, despite knowing it's very capable in specific situations, because it's always possible you'll end up in one of the situations it isn't capable of handling. We don't get to pick when a fight pushes its way into deciding whether you live or not. But for what it's worth, I find myself carrying the EZ fairly often. Real quick, Leopold Optics, you're probably never going to watch this, I'm a weirdo making videos on the internet, but you should really consider making a version of the Delta Point Micro for the EZ. Seriously, it seems like it would be a perfect melding of your optic technology and the right platform where it'll be used by a large number of people. And there isn't really a good optic option for the EZ kind of at all right now, so you would have the whole market to yourself. That's going to be it from me. Thank you all for coming out and watching this video, especially to my Patreon supporters, these names right here. Big shout out to Violet Ray and Molly McAllister. They're the members of my shout out gang. If you want your name shouted out in these videos, or your business name, or something silly, you can at the tier of my Patreon. Come join us over there. You'll also get all of these videos early. Last piece of advice before going. Stay hydrated, y'all. The amount of problems and health concerns that people have that really boil down to just not drinking enough water. You are mostly made of water. Go drink more of it and go be a bigger person, literally. But that's going to be it for me. Stay dangerous, y'all. Keep each other safe. And remember, moral doesn't mean legal. And Stonewall was a fucking riot. Peace.